On this episode of the Global Travel Channel podcast show, I talk to someone who spends a lot of his time traveling the world doing good. Find out more next. Hello and welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. My name is Mark Philpott. On the show, I talk to people from across the world about all things related to travel, from amazing adventures to inspiring stories to the not so well known destinations. We cover it all. You can find all of our previous podcast episodes on our Global Travel Channel website by going to www.globaltravelchannel.com. The Global Travel Channel is a collaboration between travel writers, photographers, YouTubers, podcasters, and bloggers from across the world. We bring you information that we hope makes your next travel experience an awesome one, no matter where you decide to travel to. You can also find the Global Travel Channel on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. So be sure to head over there and subscribe, like, and follow us so that you can keep updated on our new content postings as and when they happen. We also now have a Patreon page, so for as little as a price of a cup of coffee per month, you can help us continue to produce our podcast show by becoming a Patreon member. Check that out on our website as well. Now on to today's show. I'm always inspired to meet my new guests when they come on the show because they all bring something different, and today is no exception. On the 11th of September 1956, US President Dwight D Eisenhower founded the People to People organization. Today on the show, I'm going to be chatting to one of the organization's ambassadors. When it comes to working hard to achieve its mission across the world, this man leaves no stone unturned. I'd like to welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show, Mr. Chalks Corriette. Chalks, welcome to the show. So, Chalks, welcome to the Global Travel Channel podcast show. It's great to have you here today.
Oh, thank you, Mark. It's great to be here and fantastic to talk to you.
It's a long time since we've had the pleasure of doing that with each other, so I'm very honoured indeed that you've taken some time out of your amazingly busy schedule to be on the show today.
Time does fly by, doesn't it? We were both young men when we met.
We were. I still am in the mind, but I don't know about the rest of it.
I agree with that.
Now, a man of your many talents, I've got to ask the question, have you ever been on a podcast show before?
No. Of all
You
the
haven't?
things, no, of all the things I have done, this is quite unique.
Now, that totally surprises me because I was thinking before the show, now this guy's done everything, so he's bound to have been on a podcast show before, but you haven't.
No, not at all. Many panels and things like that maybe end up on podcasts, but not directly to a podcast.
Okay, well, I'll tell you what's a little bit unique about your experience today. First of all, I'm standing on my sailboat in the middle of the ocean at the moment, and we're just about to be hit by a massive storm because we're coming into storm season down here in beautiful Australia. So if you start to hear all hell breaking loose in the background, don't fear, everything is under control, and I'll send the dog out to pull the boat back in, so we should be all right, yeah? But it is a unique situation because not only are you on a podcast for this first time, but we're doing it from a sailboat on the ocean. So there we are.
Fantastic.
Now, let's get started. So the first thing I wanted to ask you was a random question that's just come into my mind. I ask most of my guests this and I get all sorts of wonderful answers. So I wanted to see what you come up with today. What's your favorite snack food when you're traveling?
Oh, that's a good question. Usually something nutty, because only when I'm away from my children can I do that. They're both quite allergic to nuts.
Ah, okay. So you take that opportunity to delve into some nuts.
Exactly.
Any particular nuts in particular?
Not any in particular, and nuts are the one thing you can almost universally pick up anywhere.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Now, I just had a pilot on the show last week, and he was telling me that he always has some fruit in the cockpit of his aircraft to eat because he doesn't want to have a sugar rush.
Ah.
I found that quite interesting, yeah. But
Yeah.
I do get a lot of people wanting to have chocolate, and I do have a lot of people having nuts, so you can join the nut family on the show.
Thank you, sir.
Now, we're going to chat today about one of your passions, which is the People to People International Organisation. But first, because this is a travel show, you're a man that spent a good part of your life travelling the world. Where did all that start from for you? Where did your first big travel adventure start?
Gosh, I wish I knew the real answer to that. I'm originally from, or my roots are Caribbean. My parents are from Dominica, close to Martinique and Guadeloupe. I was actually born in London, and I always felt that the UK was not my place. So even at 12 years old, I was itching to go. And the day after my last exam at Thames Valley University, when I was 18 at that time, because we started earlier back then, I left. And I moved to Sardinia, where I carried on my education, and I was in a hospitality environment, so I was doing sort of catering, hotel management, but also I was at stage school. So I did a mix of things, and I've just always traveled from Italy. I went to Bahrain, from Bahrain to the Netherlands to back home to the Caribbean to Belgium. I just love it, and I've always had jobs that ensured that I traveled with my job. So anything international and anything to do with people, I'm fascinated by people.
Now, I've watched over the years your Facebook page in particular when you check in for flights, and it seems to me that you're one of the most frequent travellers to the Caribbean that I've ever seen on Facebook. That would be the case, I think. Have you got a VIP passage to the Caribbean?
I'm not sure it's as often as that. Maybe it's just because it does pop up there. But every now and again I need to go home, partly because, as you've just mentioned, the storm issues, so sometimes having to deal with stuff at the house, and then having parents and relatives, that's often a bit of a challenge as well when you're dealing with issues of parents who are older or ill. So sometimes it's at short notice I suddenly go dashing off, but that's the nature of life. And between myself and then having a wife whose family or mother is Japanese, then you get dragged to the Caribbean or to Japan. So
there you go.
Life
Now,
is wonderful.
Tell us about that Caribbean thing, because a lot of people don't understand or can't relate to what it's like living in a hurricane zone, and it must be at times, and as we've seen over recent times, that the Caribbean's really been smashed by that. It must bring an intense feeling when you go down there during that time of the year. Is that right?
It's a bit, it's always worrying, and I think everybody else who lives there all year round, because I'm living in Belgium, it's very different. But if you live there all year round, it really is quite scary. When I was a young lad, we would get them every 7 to 10 years, the sort of force Hurricane 5s, 4 5s. But now we seem to get them every year. And in between, we also get the sort of tropical storms and then the rainstorms. And you can be sitting on my mother's terrace, and all of a sudden from Martinique, you'll see a storm coming towards you, and it comes at the rate of knots. It downpours, it blows everything, and in 20 minutes, it's blown over. And you get those all the time, and it's just a bit odd. And we live in a village where there's no electricity. We're quite remote. So when the rains are heavy, the roads get cut off, and you're just stuck, basically, until somebody can clear the road, because we're all very mountainous as well. You can't climb down, and to walk to the nearest sort of populated city takes about 8 hours. So, yeah, it's just odd. And I think all around globe, with all the changes in climate, we just noticed that all through the Caribbean, we're getting hit. Often we're forever putting a new roof back on the garage port or fixing something. But you know, they're resilient people. They just bounce back and get on with it. I'm amazed they do.
I'm imagining that as a young boy going down there and traveling there, it must have been such a amazing experience to be having that freedom and being amongst that culture, was it, compared to being in the UK?
Yeah, I didn't go when I was very young, and when I eventually went, my reasoning was that I had lived away from my grandparents basically all the time. I'd never met them, and they don't travel, they didn't speak English, they only spoke Creole. So it was challenging, and then I had to go home to live at home and live with the family to get to know everybody. And it is a completely different environment. The sun does shine every day, despite the bad weather from time to time. The sun eventually comes out for a short period of time. Everybody's relaxed. They all help each other. They all cook and share their food. When you're planning a meal, you walk out into the garden and you pick the avocado pear. You go into the river to get the shrimp, or you go down to the bay to pick up fish, which I'm allergic to, but it's there anyway. You pick up the salad. Everything is picked as you need it. And if they overcook, they leave stuff on the doorstep of their neighbours. The whole island is only 72,000 people anyway, which makes it a small village, which can either be good or bad.
From what you've just described, it sounds like the complete opposite to the UK.
Oh, it is the complete opposite. It really is. Yeah, very, very different. And I really appreciated it. Yeah. In fact, most countries in the world are just so unique in their own way. And the more we look at what is positive about them rather than seeing what's missing, because there's always something missing somewhere, but that doesn't make it wrong or bad.
Very good point.
Just different.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, going back to your reasonings behind leaving the UK and heading off to Sardinia, why did you choose Sardinia?
An opportunity came up. I was finishing catering school, and Trust House Fortes at that time were looking for students who were multi-talented. So it was this thing about hospitality and showbiz, which I was in both. And we're looking for people who had recently graduated and wanted to develop. And I just went for the interview. All my friends just thought I was completely mad, didn't speak any Italian, and had never been really to Italy at all or anything. And they all took the safe route and went for the next stage of their kind of training within an English-speaking community. I was the only one who left. But it was fantastic. And yes, you get thrown in at the deep end, and you're a new student. It's a new language. And but if you've got an open mind, you can do anything, basically.
I was going to ask you, after that experience, but also so far in the rest of your life with travel, how do you think it's changed you as a person, in particular your outlook on the world?
Wow, that I find that one difficult to answer myself because of the way I have changed, and I could only relate to it from another person's viewpoint. I am definitely much more relaxed about almost anything that can happen in life because I've seen it all, no matter what it is, been to the most crazy countries and been exposed to things. So it's made me more calm and resilient in that way, if that's the right term. I'm also more appreciative of the small things in life. Having spent time at somewhere like the township in South Africa, Kailicha, or going to an HIV centre in Botswana, or working with street children in Shanghai and things like this, you kind of see a different side of life there, and you really appreciate how much you have. That's helped me an awful lot. And in some cases, it's maybe made me quite sensitive to when I'm watching the news or listening to people speak, because you also get to understand people don't really understand the sensitivities of how interconnected the world is. and they miss so much of why things happen. And a good example is you listen to the news at the moment, and there'll be a story about migrants in a boat coming from, say, France to the UK. But of course, they're not migrants. I am a migrant. I migrate around the world for work. These guys are refugees or asylum seekers because they are fleeing persecution or fleeing something really horrible. But it serves their purposes, so to speak, to not use the right name, because migrants makes it sound like they're coming to take something from you. And the world does this all the time, and I think international travel opens your eyes to what it's really like for some of these people when you sit in their village and see what they've got or don't have, and the troubles they're under. When the guns are going off around you and things like this, you really feel it.
Now, people listening to you so far on this podcast will start to identify with the theme of you being a person who likes to have empathy for others and who likes to do things to give back. So when did this behavioural sense start in your life journey? Was there any particular epiphany around that?
No, this is my parents. My parents always brought us up to be serving or working with. When we were kids, coming up for any kind of special holiday, my mother and my aunts and everybody would cook. It's a big Caribbean thing. The women go to the kitchen. They used to throw all the men out. Not so sort of friendly these days, but that's the way it was then. And they would make the kids go down the street and go and get the elderly people who had no family and bring them into the house for a meal. My parents also served at the local cricket club. They worked at the church, and always, they always used to say to us kids, "If you can't make something better, never make it worse." So we were just brought up like that. So for me, it was just natural to get involved with things that improve quality of life. That's what my parents did always.
Did you start off by volunteering for organisations when you were young? Were you in the Boy Scouts and things like that?
I was in the Scouts when I was younger, in the British Scouts, and here in Belgium, I'm now the Group Scout leader for the Waterloo International Scouts. So I'm head of Scouts here, and my children went through Scouts as well. So yes, I kind of got in. That's one of the things that I've done, is worked a lot with young people, and even now I'm on the board of various schools and I work a lot on youth issues, both in a business sense as well as on a volunteer sense. So I do wear the kind of two hats, in that I'm both working in a commercial sector and a sort of an NGO volunteer sector as well.
Now, you and I met when we were in the heat of battle in the corporate world, and there was plenty of things going on in that particular time. How did that whole philosophy of the corporate world play with you when it comes to your compassionate side and wanting to make the world a better place? Did you struggle with that whole concept of shareholders come first and we've got to make sure the dividends go up every year? Was that a problem to you at a deeper level?
I must admit, in the beginning, when I first got into the corporate world, I didn't really know any better at that point. So it hadn't hit me that that's how the world was working. I would see it around me, but I always wore my rose-tinted glasses, so I could always see things for the benefit. I also understood that I had to earn a living. And that when I was financially stable, I could support other cause that I was passionate about. So that was another reason for working in the corporate world. And then very slowly, I found myself, through the company, always being put in roles that meant that I needed to take care of the human issues of the various teams. Not the human resources, but the working with people and helping projects get implemented by understanding the people in the project, the stakeholders, and also the communities we were going into. And then the next thing I knew, I was working for the senior management at DHL and the board of Deutsche Post, and I had the role of the director of CSR, Corporate Social Responsibility. And that's when I really learnt very much about the impact and the drive for stakeholders and shareholders being important, and the need for balance. And I started spending time at the UN, the World Economic Forum, and with an amazing professor from Warwick Business School who basically gave me a crash course in international law, social responsibility, all of the treaties that we were governed by, the Labour Organization and things like this. And I learnt from her. And that's when it hit me that corporate responsibility started out as something that we would do good for businesses in the wider society. And I believe that it was well intended and everybody went into it with the right attitudes. What started to happen, unfortunately, over time was that the PR side of it became bigger than people had anticipated. The annual reports suddenly started getting full of stories of CEOs with little children in a developing country. And the small mum and pop organizations started suffering because they were not sexy in reports. They were small organizations, often with little infrastructure, and they just kept getting overlooked. And when I eventually separated from the corporate world in order to go and do more good locally, I spent more time, and I still spend more time, with the small grassroots organizations rather than any of the big organizations. And I've done enough time with the Davos meetings and all these other big groups around the world to know that they don't need people like me to be involved. They've got enough of their own money and their own resources to do stuff, but the small groups get overlooked all the time, and that's the same today.
Fascinating journey, and you've inspired me to probably invite you back again just to come and talk about corporate social responsibility, because that's something that has evolved immensely over the last decade in particular.
It has.
But I don't want to get distracted on that today, because your journey you've just described to us is basically created this lovely segue now to go into People to People International, how you actually came across this organization. When did they come into your life, and when did you go into their life?
Yeah, I was president of a youth organization called Europe's Children Our Concerns. So because myself and my son both have ADHD, we were familiar with all of the sorts of learning issues that children with dyslexia, Asperger's and so on have. And I was heading up an organization for a few years here in Belgium as a volunteer. And the People to People guys, the PTPI team here, had been looking at my work, and a few of them were looking to retire. So they wanted to find somebody to come and be their president who could grow the organization a bit more. And they approached me, and at the time I had my hands full. I really couldn't do any more. Eventually things get a little bit easier, so I took over, I think in 2010 only, as the president for Belgium. And then within a couple of years I was heading up Europe and then on the global board. So I've served my time on the global board. I'm now back to just looking after what happens in Europe, but feeding into the global organization.
Now tell my listeners about the People to People International organization and how that was founded in its beginnings, and what's its main objective in the world.
Yeah, it was a White House initiative originally from President Eisenhower, and he was looking at the way that politics was dealing with some of the issues around the world, and in his mind actually not dealing with it. And part of it was because every time they entered a room or they made a visit, everything had to be political. So what he did, he would invite senior people from other countries to his house or to a restaurant, and they would have a person-to-person conversation or intervention of some sort, a game of golf or a walk or go horse riding, but they would do something that was personal. And the more you understand people as people, the more you can see that they are just like you. So he founded People to People International to allow peace to come about through understanding how others really tick and to see that they really are just like you. They may have grown up slightly differently with folklore and cultures, and we may eat different food and we may celebrate different things during the year. But fundamentally, health, safety, development, fun, family, friends, all these things, they're all quite the same for everybody. And so People to People International, which has been going for 60 plus years now, was born. In order to get it out of the politics, though, he had to move it out of the White House. And he was very friendly with the Hall family, Hallmark Cards in the US. They have a big space, or they had back then a space in Kansas City. So Eisenhower moved the project there, and he was at that time supported by people like Bob Hope, and Charles Schulz. Charles Schulz is the cartoonist who drew Peanuts and Charlie Brown. And
that's where you got your peanut connection from,
George. There you go.
I knew it would come out sooner or later.
Had to come out somewhere.
Yeah.
So he had an amazing group of people, a lot of former politicians as well, their families, and even today, whenever we go to some of the big events in the US as a celebration, we'll see the Trumans and the Nixons and all the grandchildren, the Eisenhowers, they're all there. And rumor has it that Disney, who was also a big sponsor, that the ride at Disney called The Small World, that everybody goes on these boats, that was actually developed from People to People International, that it is a small world, and that through education, culture, and humanitarian activities, we could all come closer together.
Fantastic. It's an amazing vision, isn't it? And ashamedly so at some levels. It's not a household name across the world, and I wonder why that is, because it sounds like an incredible not only concept, but I'm sure the work that's been achieved over the decades has been phenomenal. So why do you think it's not more widely known than it is?
I think some of it is because it's to do with people itself, actually. I'm deeply passionate, I'm crazy, I'm out there ringing the bell all the time. It's a volunteer organization. And unless you have people who are as crazy as I am and who will do the volunteering, then it does fall down. And I think this is a general challenge for many non-profits, basically, where they are dependent on volunteers. There is a for-profit part of the organization which focuses on travel programs. So you can go to Antarctica on a 10-day project to learn about what's going on in that area and the impact on the environment. So there's a lot of this kind of learning stuff. There are projects going to Cuba. So we run something like 25 travel projects a year. And those are led by knowledgeable people, sometimes joined by chapter members. But it's an opportunity for people to engage with the local culture and understand what's going on. We, as chapters, also meet each other in the various countries, and we do things like we always learn a local dance. We tend to go and try something locally to eat. We will learn some of the local words. And every year within Europe, we have a meeting. So I've just come back from Bulgaria, from Plovdiv. Last year, we were in Katowice in Poland. The year before, we were in Armenia, in Yerevan. Before that, we were in Albania. Another time, we were in Berlin. Every year, we go somewhere with the group, and people from all over the world come and join us, and we have 4 days with anywhere between 50 and 120 people, all gathering from the PTPI network as friends, because we're all about staying together as friends and understanding the cultures, and we always do various skits and things about where we're from. So the Swiss, of course, always do funny things around cheese and chocolate and stuff like that, and they're quite good fun. They really are. They are. I mean, PTPI is an amazing network, and the people are genuine people and very lovely.
So these programs, which are education based, are they open to any beneficiaries who would like to take those opportunities? Is there an age range or something as well?
Generally, on the education side, there are programs. There's a school and classroom program which connects a school in one country with a school in another country through the teachers, and there is a program that the kids run as a bit like Pen Friends over Skype, basically. So you do it class to class, and they're given a set of activities to complete during the year, either paintings, posters, songs, things that you can do practically when you're not in the same country. So that is one of the programs that is run. Then there are a number of scholarship programs, generally for member students, where they're going to a university or college and they need a top-up for their chosen subject. So that's another part of the group. And we also provide chapter funding for our youth programs, where they, for example, in Skopje, they ran a project for the local community around living libraries. There are a lot of people of a certain age group who have been through an awful lot in their life, and they got these people together as libraries to come and talk to youth in different parts of Skopje to share with them the old folklores and stories and history of what these people have been through. So there's funding for projects like that, and there are so many different examples of projects around for my brain's just gone for the right word.
That's okay. I was going to ask about, when you talk about funding, I was going to talk about, I'm standing here thinking this sounds to me like a extraordinary great opportunity for a global multinational company to come in and partner with PTP.
Yes.
To really take it to the next level. Has that not been something that's been looked at, considered, embraced? Or is it unreal?
No. You're completely right. What tends to happen is that the global organizations, they all have, and this is the thing about CSR, they're looking for the big guys for something very big and targeted, and they're after something very specific. And we tend to do more small local projects, which isn't sexy enough for some people. That being said, there are a number of tools that you can register with when you've been invited. So, for example, in Europe, we are part of a group called Humaneity, which is a kind of facilitation tool. It's a bit like the global funding sort of tools that you see out there, GoFundMe and things like this. But it's purely for people who have been invited, and it's purely for the corporate world. So our details, you have to qualify and you have to meet certain standards first of all, and you have to be annually certified, and then through that portal we receive around €1,000 a year from people like Apple and Google. And this is staff funding, so this is funding where the staff put in money that they are given, let's say as a bonus or Christmas, they put a percentage of it in the pot, and this is then shared amongst the partners, either for a specific project or to help you run your NGO.
That's very generous of Apple, out of this, $70 billion profit.
I know.
They give $1,000.
But I think everybody starts small, and some of it is we as the global NGOs, we have to get better at our reporting and showing the benefits. So we're using the UN Sustainable Development Goals now to make it easier for people to understand. Before this, people have used their own expressions, their own standards, and it's very difficult, and I understand it from the corporates, to know what anything means unless you can attach it to something. So we are now working with the UN SDGs, and for us, we trust that this will make it a little bit easier now for the bigger people to understand what's going on. We've also worked with Toyota. We did a huge project with them a few years back, bought a small transit van for a local NGO working with refugees and the homeless, and UPS helped us provide funding for the servicing of the van and insurance for a number of years. So there are some projects where we can get local funding, where something is very specific to a product that somebody's working with. You've just got to be quite nimble and flexible and open to working with people where they are. But yes, it takes time, and it is a constant, Mark. You're absolutely right, it is.
What amazes me is when I hear you talking about these big companies, they have a short memory in regarding to they were all small themselves one day. I remember an organisation that started with 3 guys out of San Francisco that became the world's largest logistics company. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. And it's true that, you know, the amount of time it takes to get, let's say, €1,000 out of a big company, we do that with private individuals. You know, people these days, if you put up a Facebook program, you can raise $500 or €500 fairly quickly, so long as you define the project. But people come to us. We had friends who got married, second marriage, so they're a bit older, they've got everything. What they did was they set up a sort of financial list, and they raised all the wedding guests, put money into their account, and they split the money between people to people and a cancer fund. You know, so I think we got €1,000 out of that from their wedding guests.
Fantastic. I'd like to go back to, you talked about your itinerary not so long ago included a place like Albania. What was your take on going to a country like Albania outside of the corporate world and being in people-to-people international, and, you know, being, I guess, hosted by locals and getting a lot closer to the local culture? What was that experience like for you?
Actually, it was brilliant, and it was far more rewarding in my sense than, you know, the corporate way of staying in sort of hotels and things like this. In some cases, we are staying in hostels, but that's just because there's too many of us to all do a homestay. But you do get to see a completely different side of the country, and it is amazing. And everywhere we go, like when I arrived, and I don't know what I expected. This is the thing. I say that I arrived in Albania and was stunned at how amazing the place is. You get into a taxi to get to where you've got to meet the gang, and of course they're not going to speak English. But they're only across the water from Italy, and they get Italian television, so we could speak to the taxi drivers in Italian. And that stunned me immediately, you know. But everything, the food, the culture, the beaches, the nature, the history, going to some of their monuments and seeing how old some of these places are, and looking at, listening to their history and learning about what has shaped them was quite amazing. And you know, and you also raise a few eyebrows sometimes when you're out with people at the things which they consider to be acceptable. We were in a restaurant with some quite senior people who wanted to meet us all, basically. And they snapped their fingers at the waiting staff. Or I couldn't believe. On the other hand, that is not considered bad manners there, so I kept my mouth shut.
as one does.
Yes, but again, you go to these places and you just think, I just hadn't realised how lovely the place was. And it's the same when I first went to Algeria. Same thing. I'd always heard so many horrible things about the place. When I stepped off the aeroplane and I got to see, I've been there 3 times now, but the place is amazing. The place is stunning. It's beautiful. The architecture, the buildings, the people are friendly. The food is just exquisite. And the history as well. When you visit, go and tour around the place, it's a lot safer now than it was when I first went. But again, you hear all the stories and then you go there and they don't match.
Yeah, that's a lot of the case. Now, I'm interested to know, as a result of that, what are some of the places you've been to around the world where you might have had an impression of a place being X and it turned out to be extremely different, just like you mentioned? Give us some of the other places you've been to where you've been really dumbfounded by what you've seen when you've arrived.
Luckily, I don't think anywhere has been negatively affected me. So I didn't go there expecting one thing and then got something less. That, to me, touch wood, has never happened. I remember when I first went to, anywhere like Jordan. I arrived in Jordan again after what you hear on the television, and it was completely different from what I had expected. I have friends from the Lebanon, and when I landed there, I was standing in the street looking around me going, this is not what you see on television. It's just completely the opposite. On television it's just a war zone and everything looks dirty and shabby and everything. And you're standing in the street and you're looking at it and you're going, but where are these streets that you see on the television? Because I never found them. And even after I came back, I was still seeing these places on television that were supposedly the Lebanon, but it wasn't the Lebanon I'd just left. And went to Brazil, Sao Paulo and Brasilia, same thing. The favelas just were not what I expected. When I went to South Africa, went into the townships and everything, again, it really was not. Now, maybe it's because I'm quite a relaxed and open person that I settle in quite easily. That might be part of it, but none of those places looked anything like I had seen on television and just did not match what I had heard people saying about them on the news. Just nothing like it.
Playing devil's advocate here and using hindsight as one of our favourite weapons, what impact do you think it would have had on the way that you travelled in the corporate world if you had all this experience that you're having now in terms of seeing the world through the eyes that you are now? Do you think it would have changed the way that you would have seen the world through the corporate travel?
Probably not, because when you're on corporate travel, you've usually got a purpose which is often corporate. So you're going to the office to run a project of some description, implementation of new software or a training program, and you have very little time to do anything other than the corporate travel. I wish I had made more of an effort, though, to maybe stay one day longer or come one day earlier to actually get out and see more. I really took the travel for granted. I think that was my one regret from my corporate travel. That would be in my early days. In my later years, the last 3 or 4 years of my corporate travel, most of it was to because by then I'd moved into the CSR role. Therefore, I was traveling to places specifically to go to difficult situations. So okay, then I had a different view, but that was still okay. The only thing I found with the corporate travel was that there were a lot of people who didn't want to come with me anymore. Well, and you know what? I understand. You turn up in the middle of nowhere, and they haven't got your luggage, and there are no shops to go and buy anything, and you kind of just have to slum it and get on with it, and it's okay.
Yeah, exactly right. Well, I've got some good news to report to you today, because I've had a guest on the show not too long ago who told me that the big multinational company he's working for, they actually give their staff one extra day to go and spend time in the local township or city, wherever they are, in addition to their corporate travel, and they want the people to get immersed in the local area and have a taste of it for an extra day on the corporate ticket. So I think that's a great thing to hear.
I think it's absolutely fabulous, and the company that you and I worked for, where we met, they also are doing much more on the understanding the human issues in the cities and villages and towns and airports in which they work. They are getting more involved in the local communities, understanding their issues, putting in place tools to actually mitigate some of the things that are caused by them, but also helping bigger causes such as the global response networks for disaster and things like this. So I think people are getting there. Is there more that can be done? I think there always will be. I don't think the job will ever be done. The world, when you consider we are the 21st century in 2019, the fact that we still have some of the issues we have is actually quite astonishing.
Absolutely. People who are listening to the show today who have been inspired by your dedication and commitment, as I am, to your efforts in giving back across the world, maybe there's somebody listening who's wanting to get into that for the first time in their life. Would you suggest that People to People International is an organisation that welcomes newbies into the whole world of humanitarianism and philanthropic activities?
Absolutely. There are different groups. People to People People to People International is great if you want to do a bit of travel, homestays, get to see places you might not usually want to go to. And there are other organisations, so you have to find what works for you. There are other people like Serve the City who deal much more with the finer issues such as homelessness and refugees. And there will always be somebody out there that will be a good fit for you. And that's one thing I had to learn. Not everything works for everybody. You've got to find that perfect fitting glove or that comfortable pair of shoes, and something that you can work with. No matter who it is, do something rather than do nothing.
That's a really good point, because I recently had another guest and we were talking about this issue, and he's going around the world at the moment making video documentaries about giving back and making a difference. And my question to him was, why don't you stay at home and do that in your home country, because there's a great need for it? And he came back to me with exactly that response. Well, his thing was he wanted to combine his passion for travel.
Yeah.
He wanted to educate himself on other parts of the world, and he wanted to showcase areas that he thought were in greater need than what was happening in his own backyard. So I guess that resonates with you as well.
Absolutely. There are a few of us who can handle the kind of more global or the big picture level of getting people inspired. There are enough people locally, I think, who can get involved and are willing to, if we can show them how it all fits together. Somebody has to join the dots, and that's what I enjoy doing. Everybody around Europe or in Belgium, I am contacted weekly for people who want to volunteer, and they've got some ideas, and I just help them find the right project for them. You know, I always would encourage people to work with their local schools. Working on education for the young people it cannot go wrong. The better educated our young people are, the better the world is going to be in the future. And if you've got some time and a skill, no matter what it is, whether it's you can cook, you can kick a soccer ball, you're good at math, you're an you're art critic, whatever, there will always be a local educational youth club or scout group who will relish having that skill in there for as much as you can volunteer. People often say to me, I don't have any time. Come on, 1 hour a month. You mean you don't have 1 hour a month to help somebody? And maybe
turn the
you can
TV off. Get out there.
There you go. Do 1 day a year. That's all it takes. If everybody does a little bit, then the rest of us who are doing as much, 20 hours a week sometimes, we could do 10 and spend more time with our families and things like this. But, it seems that even 1 day a year is difficult for people.
I'm interested to get your take on a couple of large global philosophy perspectives when it comes to making a difference in the world. You spent time at places like Davos and bigwigging it with those types of people. Can you tell us the true impact with getting events together like that versus doing something on the ground like people to people? What's the difference really for you?
The two biggest differences is that the people who come to the big events, usually they are committed to seeing the state of the world. The people who are working at the ground level, they're committed to improving the state of the world. The challenge you have is that you need people to see the state of the world before they can start to improve it. And the one thing that Davos does very well is it brings people together to have those, what would you call them, unusual conversations with people they would almost never meet, so that it would spur people into doing something else. And it was a thing I said earlier about, until you've had those conversations with people who have physically been on the ground, you often don't know what you don't know, and you haven't realized that certain policies don't work. So the chance to sit around the table with, say, Paulo Coelho, Queen Rania of Jordan, Christian Amanpour, to sit around the table with them talking about issues informally helps enormously. It really does.
So what's your view on why does it take a young Norwegian girl to bring to the global platform the climate change issues that politicians should have been working on for the last decades?
She's got a point in as much as the challenge for adults is that we still drive for productivity improvements and revenue improvements. We still shout at Apple if they don't improve their quarterly results, even though they are one of the richest companies in the world. And she's absolutely right. We are so busy looking at what's happening to our bottom lines that we've forgotten to look at the line on the horizon and what is happening out there and the impact of us doing it. And I think she was ideally placed at the right time, in the right place, to hold that mirror up to us. And I know that a lot of grown-ups are out there saying, oh, in our day we didn't have all this technology and we went out and played on the street. And Greta and the youth are saying, you're absolutely right. But then why did you create all these other products and push it down our throats and give it to us as presents? You're blaming us and saying that we are driving it, but you dangled the genie in front of us. And the genie's out now and we don't know how to put it back in. But she's right. It takes somebody like her to use the words that she did, and she's spot on with her messaging. And I do think that the grown-ups really have to think about what they're doing. And I know people say we're not absolutely sure, but if we're not absolutely sure, we should err on the side of caution, because if we get it wrong, the disasters, they're catastrophic. And if you happen to come from an island who's disappearing already, think about somewhere like Vanuatu and the Solomon Islands. These guys, for them, it's too late. The islands are already disappearing. The sea is already consuming them. The weather is ravaging them. They're not going to make it. They've got to make hard decisions about where they go next.
Does the Caribbean have rising sea levels like this part of the Pacific Ocean over here?
Yes, we do. Yeah. Well, my island does. We're right on the where the Caribbean Ocean and the Atlantic join, we're actually on that line. And because we're mountainous, our two local airports are almost at the sea level, and the water is coming in, and somebody decided they would build a wall alongside one of them, but of course the sea just went round the wall and came in a different way. I was amused when I saw the wall go up, but
we can learn a lot from Mother Nature.
Oh, absolutely. She's constantly telling us, you know, and I remember I was doing something with some university students here in Belgium, looking at the issues of climate change on the small islands in the Caribbean. And one of the students said to me, if you were advising your government, what would you say? And I said, we need to leave the island. We weren't there however long ago. She's telling us to get off and go back to where we came from. You know, and we might have to, because the sea's coming up fast and the weather's getting really bad, and we may have to move back to somewhere like Trinidad or Guadeloupe or Martinique. They are a lot more stable. They have their issues, but they're far more stable than Dominica.
Brilliant. Now, look, I'm not going to miss out on the opportunity of having you on the show and not being able to ask you some questions about passing on some tips to my audience about how to transit and prepare for your trips the best, how to transit through customs and airports the most efficiently. What are some of your hot travel tips for people that are about to pack their bags and head off on the next holiday?
Oh, that's a good one. I have learned to keep anything I don't really need in my cabin baggage. Literally just don't have it there, because if you have to be stopped at security and everything, it's a real pain. I tend to have little sort of wallets of bags or something that I can put all my keys, my cell phone, and all the stuff that's in my pockets, my belt, so that when I put it on the conveyor belt, it's one bag instead of, you know, all over the place. I tend to always have my laptop and my liquids immediately ready. They're very accessible, and I just make sure I've got everything that I need in terms of either a printed, if I've checked it myself, my boarding pass, and I'm using my phone much more these days now, wherever I can. But just being prepared, thinking ahead, where am I going, what medication might I need, what do I not need in my hand baggage, and I just pack it all away.
Are you somebody that does that planning the night before you leave, or are you doing it like a few days in advance?
Oh no, I'm terrible. It's either the night before I leave or the morning before I leave. But because I'm so structured, because my ADHD brain, there is a method to everything. So the suitcase already has the pieces I need already in it, and therefore it's not an issue. I can afford to do it the night before. And unless I'm going to something very unusual where I need either a different form of dress or a gadget that I need, then generally I'm okay with packing the night before or even the morning of.
Now, are you the sort of guy that gets to the airport well before his flight and sit down and have a coffee and watch people, or are you there last minute?
I'm on time. I need to be just in time. You know, I need enough time to relax, get my way through, have a drink, have a coffee, and I do people watch. But yes, I prefer to be early than late.
And you're a window or aisle guy?
I'm an aisle guy. It's very difficult because I love looking out the window, but I twitch too much and I get up too much for the customers. Again, ADHD means you can't sit still for very long, and I twitch all night because my brain is so active, and it drives everybody around me mad. So I really have to be in the aisle.
Right. Well, that's a good excuse for that, and it's also very considerate of you for other passengers as well.
Yeah.
Have you got a funny travel story you can share with us before I let you go today?
The funniest thing that's really ever happened to me on my travel once is some friends decided to play a prank on me, and they slipped something that security would definitely see on the camera as my bag went through into the bottom of my bag, and then they put some ladies' lacy red underwear in my bag. And so when the customs officers emptied everything out, they went, "Oh, what are these?"
Not only was the underwear red, I'm sure.
Yes.
Absolutely. Funny.
Oh, my friends.
So, Chalks, what's the future hold for you and People to People International and you travelling the world, making the world a better place? What's in your vision for the next couple of years?
For the next couple of years, I definitely need to do a bit more of the home travel. I've got some work to do at the house and with my mum to sort out stuff with her, with the farm and everything. And then we've got a number of student projects. So we're working on a project in Skopje at the moment. So at some point I will visit them. And then it's a case of figuring out how best to help other students. We have students doing some amazing things in Kosovo, for example. And I've got a team in Romania that I'm about to go and visit very shortly. But it's all down to what I can also fit in with my working life and fund often through work, basically. Because you cannot raise money for some of these projects, these community projects. So you've got to work, and then from your profits as a self-employed person, then you can sort of pay for other things and do things. But a lot of it is about the youth. The future is about the youth, and the more we can support people like Greta Thunberg and other kids like her that are going to help move the planet forward and the issues of the planet forward, that's where my focus is.
Fantastic. Well, listen, it's been absolutely fantastic reconnecting with you today. I want to applaud you on behalf of all my listeners for the amazing work and commitment you've done, not just recently but over a number of decades in your life, and you're a person that's both inspirational and also making the world a better place without any doubt. And it's an honour to have you on my show and to hear your story, and I hope it inspires many others to get in contact, and who knows, we might be able to get more people involved in the People to People International. So Chalks, thanks very much for taking the time.
No, thank you very much, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
And I'll hold you up to the notion of coming back and talking about corporate social responsibility another time.
I look forward to it, sir.
Have a great day.
And you, take care.
There we are. That was Chalks Corriette talking to us from Brussels in Belgium today. And what an inspirational guy. He's been working for many decades now and making the world a better place. And he's been to some of the most fascinating places on the planet to do that as well. Maybe it's inspired you to give up some of your spare time to help volunteer at either a local organisation or do good in your community some way. Let's hope so. Now, that's it for this particular episode of the Global Travel Channel podcast show. If you're looking for other episodes on our channel, head over to our website at www.globaltravelchannel.com. It's easy to find. And you can also download our podcast from Apple iTunes, from Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and a host of other platforms that are all listed on our website. Now, if you happen to like our show, please recommend it to other friends of yours or family members, because we want to try and get as many people listening to our travel show as we possibly can. And don't forget, you also have the option of actually helping us through Patreon. Head over to our Patreon page and actually become a member and help us make this show sustainable right into the future. Okay, I'll be back again soon with another episode. My name is Mark Philpott. Until then, I wish you all bon voyage.